what's up? Hey, this is Joint House Inquiry Edit. Ray LaHood is interviewing the staff director, Eleanor Hill. Let's see what's happening.
Mr. LaHood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Hill, thank you for your service to our committee and to your staff, too. I know they've worked long hours.
That's very true, and they've done an excellent job.
They really have. I agree with that. And to Kristen and Steve, thank you for, if you're still here, for being here and your testimony and the people that you represent. Obviously, our hearts go out to all of you. Ms. Hill, if you take all the information that's in your report today and you analyze all that information, and then you look at the notion that there was a lot of information prior to 9/11. There were a lot of people in separate ways who saw it, and if you took that information and it was analyzed correctly, and the people responsible, whether it be the president, the vice president, the national security advisor, the CIA director, FBI director, if they had had all the information that you've collected and documented in your report, could 9/11 have been prevented? If they had seen the Phoenix memo, if they had seen the memo from Minnesota, if they had seen, really had all of these transits, that these documents that had come over the transit for any number of days, I mean, there has to be some idea about, because the criticism is that a lot of information came, but it wasn't shared. A lot of information was available, but wasn't shared, and the right people didn't know it. Well, if you take all that information, and if it had been shared with the highest elected people in our government and the highest appointed people in our government who have responsibility for counteracting these activities, could 9/11 have been prevented?
My own view is that I don't think anyone will ever be able to say, no one will ever really know whether 9/11 could have been prevented, because what we're talking about here is we not only would have to know what everyone would have done with the information they had in the intelligence community in terms of law enforcement and intelligence, you would also have to know how bin Laden and the hijackers would have reacted. We don't know that. I mean, it's all, we're hypothesizing, and there's been so much emphasis on, was there a smoking gun, was there a where, when, how, that sort of thing. We haven't found that. What we have found is a lot of information, a lot of things that weren't put together, and to me, maybe the biggest issue is, and we say it somewhat in the statement, not only that they weren't put together, but they weren't recognizing the importance, given everything else they should have known. For instance, in the summer of 2001, that's the summer that you had Midhar and Hazmi, you had Phoenix, you had Moussaoui, you had a high threat level. Well, you would think that with all of that, when you got Phoenix or you got Moussaoui or you got, it would have even been more, you would have been more aggressive with it. And
Let me give you a straightforward answer. Yes. Most likely could have prevented most of it. Now, let me give you some examples. Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi out west. The CIA, as you know, intentionally withheld from the FBI regarding their presence inside the United States, knowing full well that they came from a high-level terrorist summit meeting in Malaysia. The Saudi intelligence, which wasn't shared with the United States, proves that there was a large Saudi nexus in San Diego and Los Angeles, giving logistical and financial support to those both men. The CIA knew where they were, so did the NSA. And the FBI had no idea, neither did the Department of State. On the other end, you had the Hamburg cell. That's Mohammed Atta, Mohammed al-Shahid, Ziad Jarrah, hijacker pilots, known to the Israelis, known to the CIA. Nothing. Nothing was shared. The FBI got a hold of some information in 2001, late 2001, August, which shows that the intelligence services withheld this information but couldn't withhold it any longer. because certain people within the FBI who were on loan from New York, working at the CIA's virtual station, the Bin Laden issue station, codename Alex Station, found out that Khalid al-Mihdhar and Wafa Hasbi were inside the United States. And so the chief of station, Richard Blee, and the deputy chief, Tom Wilshire, went to informed the FBI in late August about Khalid al-Mihdhar and Wafa Hasbi inside the United States. Was anybody fired? Was anybody held accountable? No. Now you had foreign intelligence, which wasn't known at the time of the joint inquiry. Or if it was known, it was ignored. So this information and whatever the Israelis and Saudis collected, we'll never know because we deported all of them. They were held for, an insubordinate amount of time, inordinate amount of time, and then they were let go. Because the first crime they committed was a visa violation crime. If they committed a federal crime, it would come secondly, because the first crime they committed was overstaying their temporary visas, knowing full well that they would have to be handed over to Immigration Naturalization Services. And what's their punishment? Well, deportation. No further investigation into them possible. You think the Saudis and Israelis are going to give them up back to the United States for further inquiry?
And that didn't happen. So there's a lot of unknowns. There's questions whether people would have, if you had caught one hijacker, would they have replaced him with someone else? There's questions about could you, if you had got.
What about the additional hijackings that were going to take place on September 11th and on September 13th, when they arrested over 50 Arabs at JFK and LaGuardia? Who were these people? We'll never know. We deported them. Why were they coming on the planes with knives and box cutters? One was dressed as a pilot, but he wasn't. Who are these people? Were they a second wave? According to co-chair Bob Graham of the Joint Inquiry, he happens to believe that there were going to be a second wave of attacks. Why is that covered up? Were they Al-Qaeda? Were they somebody else? That certainly goes against the narrative of 19 hijackers, doesn't it?
On to one of these cases, could you have surveilled and perhaps found what was going on? All of those are hypotheticals, and we're never going to know. But I think what we do clearly know is that the community could have done a lot better, and the intelligence side
but
and
your
the
answer
law
is that
enforcement
the community could have done a lot better, but knowing what we know about information that was there, and the dots were never connected in a lot of these different areas, you're not saying, though, that the community could have prevented this. They could have done a lot better, but they couldn't have prevented it.
No, I didn't say they. I never said
I want to know. I want you to be able to tell us pretty definitively here, for these people that are here, that if all the dots were collected and all the information was shared and all the right people would have known it, could we have prevented 9/11?
I would say.
I mean, that's the criticism all over this town and all over the country and all over the world, that we collected a lot of information, but it wasn't connected, that people didn't connect the dots, they didn't share information. And my question is, and I think it's a question on the minds of the American people, if it had been done correctly, could it have been prevented? And people that are promoting a blue ribbon committee, which I'm not, are saying that that's the way we get to the bottom line. But I want to know from you, who've been working at this now for several months, could it have been prevented?
I can't say guarantee that it could have been prevented. There could have been some things done that there's possible that they might have been able to uncover some of this plot if they had had the information on individuals and they had followed them and they had surveilled them and the individuals had talked about something and they might have picked it up. I mean, all of those are ifs. It's one if after another. You're never going to know that. But
Right. You know why? Because you classify information for the next 30, 40 years, just like you did with JFK. Now, what's the reason for it? Well, the reason is simple, that you had the information that could have prevented 9/11. Now, according to Thomas Drake, former senior executive of the NSA, he basically said that the NSA had collected so much metadata in the year or two prior, even the years prior to 9/11, that goes back to the mid 90s, that they alone could have prevented 9/11 if the information was shared. And that Thomas Drake, in the days after 9/11, collected this information in disk form and gave it to Maureen Baginski. I think she was the assistant director of SIGINT. And she said, "What is this?" And he says, "This is the information the NSA had collected." And she said to him, "Tom, I wish you hadn't shown me this, because no longer does she have plausible deniability. That the information could have been shared and prevented 9/11 from happening. Just the NSA alone. Who knows what the CIA had? Who knows what the Israelis and Saudis had?"
If you don't get beyond the point that they could have done better, that's what they have to do the next time, because if they don't, you're not going to have a shot at preventing this the next time. That's where the issue is, not so much preventing what's already happened, it's preventing what may happen in the future that we have to focus on. That's my own view. And I think to prevent what may happen in the future, there's a lot of things that have to be done to get us there.
Look, I'll just say it like this. It's real simple. The intelligence apparatuses worked. They collected information. They monitored many of these Al-Qaeda subjects abroad. And then foreign intelligence monitored them here. And in the process, they collected data. This data, this is what the whole primary of an intelligence operation and service is about. It's about collecting data, information. That this information was not shared. Now, if the information is not shared, that means other agencies, most notably the government, the federal institutions, they can claim plausible deniability because this information wasn't shared. And remember, the intelligence services are basically an extension of these institutions, the White House, for example. So if the president doesn't know, if the Secretary of State doesn't know, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of the Treasury, if they don't know, then they don't know. Now, they could know an attack may be upcoming, because when they're holding these principals meetings, which is the leading principals of the Pentagon, the intelligence apparatuses, and the State Department, is that they'll basically say, "Yeah, we got some information, but it's pretty vague." So it's almost like a warning. Hey, wait a minute. We're sensitive for an attack. Now, the president may know that an attack is upcoming, but he doesn't know specifics. Remember, these people have to go before TV a lot. So the less that they know, the better up they are. And they could feign ignorance, total ignorance, which could be the case. But I think with 9/11, it wasn't. Now, do I say that George Bush or Donald Rumsfeld or Dick Cheney knew about 9/11 specifics? No. The people that probably know about specifics are either the perpetrators in Guantanamo and or the intelligence agencies and their peoples who aren't before a TV camera and certainly doesn't have to talk. Well, this silence is bought by the sheer benefit of allowing 9/11 to happen. Now, if you could say the following in detraction, and say, well, 3,000 people were killed. Do you think they have a conscience? Well, 1 million people are killed in Iraq. And for those who dismiss those deaths, I mean, you have to question your moral barometer. You're that closer to being a total sociopath, somebody who doesn't show empathy for their fellow man, no matter what culture they are. So it's beneficial for certain people in these intelligence circles to remain quiet and out of the spotlight, so they don't have to talk, because the more they talk, the more that they are to fumble and make a mistake and let something out that shouldn't be let out. That's why the 9/11 Commission and the Joint House Inquiry didn't interview Richard Blee, didn't interview the CIA's Alex Station employees like Michelle Ann Casey, who was in charge of the CIA's monitoring of the Yevon Hub, which was the Al Qaeda communications center. Closed door testimony for Alfreda Ann Bukowski. It's not public. And neither is the interviews of George Bush and Dick Cheney. That's not public either. Why? So, yeah, had they shared information with each other, I happen to think that, yes, most of 9/11 could have been prevented. I can't say for sure all of it, like Eleanor Hill did, but Eleanor Hill basically just said that, it's a hypothetical. Playing it safe, she has to. But according to some, yes, the information, if shared, could have prevented 9/11. Ask Ken Williams, who wrote the Phoenix Memo. Ask Thomas Drake, who was the former senior executive of the NSA. Ask Colleen Rowley, Minneapolis lawyer, who tried to get a FISA warrant to open Moussaouy's laptop. Ask Mark Rossini, who tried to contact the FBI about 2 Al Qaeda members here inside the United States and wasn't allowed to do so. Question is, why? And unless we start asking the right questions, we're not going to get anywhere near to an answer.